Hi, I'm Coach Alice, and welcome to episode 33 of the Keeping It Real vlog. This is week 3 of quarter 4 as we are barreling towards the end of the school year at the rate of 5 days per week. We have made it to the end of another one, and the theme of this week is monitor and adjust. I mentioned towards the end of the last vlog that I had to make the kind of move on the fly to reduce us from 10 works of literature to 5, and I think that was a good choice. The kids appreciated that, and I think they were able to focus on some quality over quantity on that. Having to be willing to be flexible and kind of read things as they're going is beneficial. A good decision that I think I made was to have the things that required 10 to be first, and now that we're moving into some of the things that require 5 components, that is giving them, it's less overwhelming, I guess, for them as they're trying to get caught up on the other things. I initially thought about maybe doing it in the reverse and giving them the things with 5 components and then working their way up to the bigger ones, but I'm much happier that I didn't, that they have more time to work on the things that are bigger lists. So that part's going well. Did have to reduce 1 from 10 to 5. That was just the smart thing to do. There were originally going to be 2 separate categories, one for skills specifically, and then one for facts and concepts. I decided before we got to that section to combine those things to skills and concepts. So facts kind of fall in there, and just basically as things that kids should learn or learn how to do. And my students actually responded really well to that particular question. They had the easiest time with the explanations for the skills and concepts that they think that students should learn before they graduate. I think it is a little bit more inherently obvious as to an explanation for that one, but there's still a little bit of struggle with other things of like the YouTube videos. Kids coming up with the YouTube videos was a lot harder than I expected it to be for them. Usually once they get started on that, they are able to start rolling. A lot of kids found like how-to videos and some DIY things. Some are tempted to just like put what's interesting to them, and one kid was putting in highlight videos of this week's NBA playoff games, and it's like, yeah, that's not quite what the assignment is, so you have to go back and work on those things. But yeah, the YouTube video component was harder than I expected it to be. They don't necessarily realize how many useful things, utilitarian things there are out there. And then we talked about, if there's like iconic performances, be they athletic or entertainment or scenes from movies, all kinds of things. I've given them many different examples, presentations. I think it's opened their eyes a little bit maybe to that resource of what's out there, and getting them to think about that. But yeah, getting them to explain why people should see something, not just summarize what something is. I think a lot of these problems that we have come from students growing their entire lives in this really basic traditional structure where I guess the bar is just low. The bar is too low on so many things of like, give me a summary of this thing, do the multiple choice of this thing. They're so used to jumping through hoops that every time they see an assignment, even when you're asking for something deeper, it throws them off. They're not as prepared for that, which is something we always struggle with at the start of the year. We're having some more of that here towards the end of the year, where just give me the hoops that I can jump through and get this thing over with. But I think we're starting to get past that, and they're kind of like starting to see the bigger picture. The other adjustment that I made was seeing like how much time that they need. I was going to start teaching them Inkscape, the free software that they're going to use to make their collages in the program that we can laser engrave them with. I was going to teach that next week. I decided to teach that at the end of this week. So I gave them a bit of a head start for the ones who were here, and they will hopefully be able to help the other ones who weren't as we start teaching it to them. And we'll do that early next week instead of, basically move that up so they would have more time to do that. So it's imperative for a teacher to be able to recognize things that you need to adjust in the middle of them. So like when you have a project that's going to span 8-9 weeks, as they're doing something and you recognize, okay, I'm going to have to change the way that we're doing this. I'm going to have to change the expectations, or the way that I taught that didn't work, and I'm going to have to find a different angle to show that. Or sometimes it's just the thing itself. What I was assigning them didn't make sense, and I don't have to necessarily light it all on fire, but what can I tweak to make that a more reasonable plan? Or the way that I taught it, or the way that they're doing it. Some things, sometimes you have to tweak around the edges. And then over the, like I said, if it's a longer project like I've been doing this year, sometimes you have to have your eye, you always have to have your eye looking ahead at what's coming next. And sometimes you then have to make adjustments before you get to those points. So those two examples this week or from the last 2 weeks, I recognized as they were trying to turn in the literature pieces, they were struggling, that it was appropriate to reduce that to something where they can focus on quality over quantity. I don't want you just filling this out with stuff that you haven't really read, or that you haven't taken, or you don't have the time to really get familiar with. That was an in the moment thing. And then the skills and facts concepts being two different things that I decided to combine to one to save them both time and to just make it a more manageable piece for them. That was a looking forward thing that's also less confusing for them. So those are the adjustments that you have to be willing to make. You can't be so arrogant to assume that, especially when you're doing a new project for the first time. You don't have to be arrogant and stubborn and say, hey, this is how I planned it. This is when we were going to do what. I'm sticking to my plan no matter what. It's just going to make things harder than it has to be. You have to swallow your pride and say, yeah, maybe I didn't think this through as best as I could have. And now that I am seeing this in action, maybe I need to make adjustments. And then if I'm thinking ahead, it's one of those things that I can try to adjust for. And then when I reflect at the end, I can go back and say, hey, was that a good idea? Sometimes you'll make an adjustment and it wasn't for the best if you're predicting that something needs to happen. But that's what the reflection is for. You have to be patient with yourself and be willing to make changes the next time you do something like this. So that's where I am right now at the end of week 3 of quarter 4. And we'll talk to you next week.